Our next speaker is truly phenomenal in her own right. Miss Brooke DeLench is the producer, director of the new PBS documentary, The Smartest Team, Making High School Football Safer, the author of Home Team Advantage, The Critical Role of Mothers in Youth Sports, which is published by HarperCollins. She is the executive director of Moms Team Institute, a youth sports safety watchdog and advocacy nonprofit, and the founder and publisher of MomsTeam.com, now in its 14th year as a trusted source of health, safety, nutrition, and parenting information for sports parents, coaches, and the medical community. Since launching its pioneering Concussion Safety Center in 2001, Moms Team has been a leader in providing comprehensive concussion education and practical advice on ways to reduce concussion risk and properly manage them when they occur. Ms. DeLench is sought after as a consultant and public speaker on a wide variety of youth sports safety issues. Notably, Ms. DeLench was recently appointed to the National Council on Youth Sports Safety, a 2-year initiative to prevent the incidence of catastrophic injuries in young athletes spearheaded by former U.S. Surgeon General David Satcher. And notably, an issue near and dear to my heart, she is also the mother of sports active triplets. So welcome, and we look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Herner. That was very nice. I can't start without thanking Joshua Chazin. I am so impressed with the work that you have done. I think I've already done about, maybe 8 concussion talks this year alone, and many of them have been put together by professionals who have been working in sports concussion for a long time, and I can tell you he is really phenomenal, really done a nice job. Actually, I may ask him to come up here and show me. I don't have my computer here, but I think I know how to work this.
The arrow will take you to the next slide.
Okay, good. Can you see that okay, or do you have to dim the lights? Okay. So Professor Herner told you that we would be talking about medicine, about law, and about the human components here. So what I'm going to do is bring you the human components and let you know about my work for the past 14 years. And actually, when I began Mom's Team 14 years ago, much of it had to do with the injuries that my own triplet sons had been sustaining during sports. And one of my sons actually had to be taken out of football because of a concussion. And so if you actually go into momsteam.com, you're going to see that we have a health and safety channel, and it is very dense with information on how to keep kids safe, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and sexually. But we really focus on concussions, and I am extremely proud to say that I have a person who is my health and safety editor, who is a litigator and by trade, but has over 14 years become more and more involved in what we do. And I have to say it's because of that law degree that we make sure that everything that we put out is really sound. So I've been talking about concussions for a long time, and I was speaking in front of about 2,000 parents back in the summer of 2011. And a parent from Oklahoma, I was talking in Virginia, a parent from Oklahoma happened to be in the audience, and that parent was a school board member back in Oklahoma. And I received a call about 6 months later from this mom and school board member, and she simply said, "I need your help. We have 160 boys on the football team, and we're watching it shrink down to about 140 Many of the kids are not signing up again because a couple of our key players have just had very bad concussions. And she said, my son is on the team and I really want him to play. We live in Oklahoma. So she said, could you come out for 2 hours and talk to the school board? And, by this point, I've been working in this field for so long that I really did not want to go out for 2 hours because it would not have done it justice. So we talked a little bit longer, and actually I said, maybe if you let me come with a whole team and parachute in for the entire season, and then we document how we take all of our great studies by some of the greatest, most wonderful, you've heard some of the names here already, experts. We take those studies and we apply them to your team. So what we ended up doing was we did parachute in, and for the entire season, I brought in neuropsychologists, neurosurgeons, pediatric concussion experts. The helmet companies helped me, and we did all of the testing, neuropsychological baseline testing in the beginning of the season. We did the sideline testing. We did testing after the season, after every game. So what I knew going in was that there was a 10% amount of concussions. So there were about, we had about 16 to 17 concussions. Here are the boys that I worked with, some of them. And you can see what I did was I went in and I talked to them in the beginning and asked them how many concussions they actually had in the past season. This was in June. No hands went up. Excuse me, I'm battling a cold. No hands went up in the beginning of my meeting. I went in without any adults, and I really wanted to talk to these 15, 16, 17-year-old boys like I talked to my own sons. And as we talked longer and longer, I realized what was going on with these kids, why they had such a high amount of concussions. Now remember, they've been having about 10%, and that's about the norm, between 8 and 10%. So any given year, if you've got 160 kids on a team, you're going to have about 10 concussions if they don't know what they're doing. As it turned out, these kids were not doing anything the right way, and I'll talk about that as we go through. Long story short, I said to the boys, finally I said, look, if I can get your concussions down to half, to 8, with my team from around the nation, how would it be for you? Would you be interested? And they said, you probably can't do it. And talked further, and I said, okay, tell me about your helmets. Let's start with your helmets. What are you wearing? Tell me what you do with your helmets. And I found out that the kids were using their helmets as weapons. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go through. They were actually leading with their heads into the opponents. So we're going to see what we did. I brought in an NFL tackle expert to actually spend an entire day teaching these kids how to tackle again. I brought in Rydell. I brought in Rydell, Shutt, and Rawlings. And they supplied about 200 helmets to the kids. And what they did was, let's go through. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. And this is, to me, it's so exciting. I could stand here and talk forever. What I want to tell you before I get to the end is we took the amount of concussions from 16 a year, 17 a year, 18 a year, down to 2. And we documented it, and I'm going to tell you how we did that. So we're going to quickly talk about the categories for sports helmets. We're talking about football helmets. It happens to be what I documented for the PBS film, which is still playing around the nation. I'm going to talk a little bit about current technology, groups and organizations who are involved in this helmet technology, the challenges that we have out there, and the future standards. So the categories really, you probably all have worn at least 2 helmets, whether it's on your bike, skateboard, team sports, we've got baseball, softball, snow sports, you ski, snowboard, ice skating, individual. This is a helmet that is made by a Swiss company called POC. It actually came up in our conversation last night at dinner. And it is a company in Switzerland that is doing phenomenal work around bike helmets and snow sport helmets. Many of you probably saw a couple of things. There were a lot of great images that came out of this Sochi Olympics. Here's a helmet that I thought was a little interesting. It's actually got the brain that was painted on it. And then here's a helmet down here that actually cracked. It was with a Czech snowboarder. She fell backwards. Her helmet cracked. She had a concussion. She did not fracture her skull. And we need to remember that these helmets, all helmets, are really made to prevent a skull fracture. They do not prevent a concussion. They do limit the risk of concussion in many situations, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we're going to focus right now on the high-impact collision sports of football, ice hockey, lacrosse, soccer, and rugby. So new technology that we're looking at in this field, and again, I'm bringing the human component. I'm actually giving you sort of the big picture out here. So you're going to have a lot of questions and a lot to think about, and your antenna will go up a lot as you're going through your day and hearing more and more. So mouth guards, right now, no scientific proof today that mouth guards prevent a concussion, but there are some new studies coming out all the time that might sway our opinion a little bit. Neck stabilizers. Many companies are now coming out with a helmet that fits into the body protection gear, which the theory behind that is race car drivers are using this helmet so that you don't have that rotational force. Most concussions do happen when you have that quick rotational whiplash is really what it is. Soft helmet caps, these are all new, these are all coming out. We had a real problem with the soft helmet cap companies saying that they prevented concussions. They don't. We're also got a lot of controversy around field hockey, soccer, rugby, lacrosse. Should they be wearing helmets? Many of us feel absolutely not, because we have seen the transition from helmets becoming weapons. People just feel invincible, and we see a lot more accidents and a lot more injuries happening with the kids that are wearing helmets. The new, going on a little bit, so different helmets for different positions. We're going to start seeing that there are new helmets that come out for different positions. Whether you're a linebacker or a quarterback, right now companies are developing different types of helmets, and I'll tell you why in a second. At Mom's Team Institute now, especially because the documentary has been playing all across the nation from August, it's still playing across the nation, will be updated with new technology information for 2014 and 2015, which is a lot of fun, but we continue to get tons of new information. It's exciting because now we've got 6 prototypes for new helmets right in my office, and I've been called and have met with a number of companies who actually had submitted money to the NIH and to NFL because they've got new designs. These are all fascinating, really interesting. Impact sensors is something that I am very intrigued with and have been aware of really for 10 years. For 10 years, we have been developing, excuse me, this technology. And right here, you'll see this is a shut helmet. It actually is one of the helmets that the Newcastle, Oklahoma kids are using. And it has a impact sensor on the back of it. And very conveniently, we have the manufacturer, developer of this brain sentry. But you see it sits right on the back there. And in the first year we documented the kids, we used one impact sensor. And then the second year, and that's all that was available, and there were no others that were for sale. And the second year, all of a sudden, we had, this past season, we have about 6 that are on the market. So we used 4 on the team, and we used the Rydell Hits, which is inside the helmet, and then we used 3 others that sit on the outside of the helmet. What do these do? They're a monitoring tool. They alert the sideline to the heavy hits. They're a teaching tool. So the kids who, I don't know if you could see this right here, but those are scratches on this boy's helmet. He is one of the 2 kids that actually had a concussion. And we looked at his helmet and we said, you keep leading with your head, even though we've taught you, we've brought in tackling people to teach you. So the teaching tool of these impact sensors is fabulous. Tracking tool, now we're beginning to record the number of hits for each to develop thresholds. Years and years away. We can't even get a threshold on kids who have had concussions. So if you hear something about the hit count, you know, it's got good intents, but it is so far away. Locating tool, now we see some of these, there's a company called IceDot that actually makes out of Oklahoma, makes a sensor, fits on a ski helmet or a bike helmet, actually has a GPS in it. So theory being, if you go out and you're lost, somebody's going to be able to find you. It also will tell a parent if a child's had a head injury that you might not know about. These are not for diagnosis. We are not diagnosing any concussions with these, so there's no threshold. They certainly are a set of eyes or another tool for an athletic trainer. And then what we do is as we were monitoring the kids on the field, if we saw that they had a significant G-force hit, we would actually bring them over to the sideline and do the baseline testing. We introduced the King Divic, which 3 years ago we started working with Steve Divic on, and then he let us use the test. We actually introduced it last year when it came out. We used I've got the SCAT-3 here, but it was a SCAT-2. Now we use the SCAT-3 and the SAC test. So there are a number of different types of these impact sensors. We've got the kind that are on the body. That's the X2, which is going to be right on the neck. We've got a shoulder patch. We've got an earbud, which fits inside the ear. And then we've got the head. Now this is where it gets very controversial, and I'm sorry, probably I'm talking too long, but the third-party add-ons, which are the Brain Sentry, the Safe Brain, G-Force Tracker. Greg's got a lot of company, but I love his product for many reasons. These only weigh about an ounce. And we've got the self-policing NOXI, which is the overseeing entity of helmets, now saying that we cannot use these impact sensors on helmets. So this is all very controversial. And these are the standard setting groups, the CPC, DOT. So a lot of different groups. By the way, we have a phenomenal amount of information on momsteam.com that you'll be able to get any of this information afterwards. But as we go along, I think that we really should focus on, and you as future attorneys or the heads of companies that are going to really rely on your background as law students. It's important to know that right now we've got a really tough situation on our hands of who is going to be actually monitoring and setting standards for not only helmets, but the impact sensors. We have no standards for youth helmets. Our kids are not protected. And as far as the adult helmets, the standards were set back in 1976, which means we've got a lot of work to do just to make sure that we are protecting all of our kids and that these companies are not just protecting the helmets and the helmet companies. So I have to wrap up, and I apologize. We should talk about the culture of resistance at some point and the challenges. Boy, I went way over, I'm sorry. But here's all my information. If you need any further clarification, please feel free just to email me directly. Sorry.
So thank you so much. One thing I love about the work that Ms. DeLunch is doing is that it's very much an eyes wide open approach, right? Children and adults are going to play these sports. How can we make them as safe as possible? And so for my future lawyers in the room, one thing to think about, and perhaps Mr. Packman can give us his perspective on it, is knowing you may not be able to eliminate the risk, you can only mitigate it. How does that translate into a legal standard, and what's the appropriate balance there? But thinking along the lines of safe play, let's stay with that and the product design and innovation that's happening. And let's go to our third and final speaker on this particular panel. Mr. Greg Merrill is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Brain Sentry, a company that makes impact sensors that detect and alert players, coaches, and other individuals when the brain may have been subjected to a force high enough that results in an injury, as you just heard Ms. DeLunch talk about. Now, for my business students in here, I want you to take note of this. Brain Sentry was recently named Startup of the Year by the Wall Street Journal. We have an entrepreneur in our midst. Mr. Merrill has served as the founding CEO for 3 VC-backed fast-growth wellness and medical product companies. His medical products have won Business Week's Best Product Design of the Year and Popular Science's Best of What's New awards. Mr. Merrill has authored numerous peer-reviewed technical papers and is an inventor with 17 issued patents. Please welcome Mr. Merrill.
Thank you. This is a great meeting. All the background information has been great. So I've been, for the past 25 years, working on various health-related products. And about 3 years ago, I was doing some consulting work with a company that was developing an assessment tool for brain injury for the military. And I thought, well, this would be great to put on the sidelines for football so we can figure out which kids have concussions. And I realized that we're so dependent on the kids reporting their symptoms that it doesn't matter how good the assessment tool is, it's not going to work because we don't know who to assess. So that's what led me to thinking about developing this type of sensor technology. Before I get into too much of that, though, I just want to talk about the various clinical issues, and I've put the clinical issues into 3 different buckets. And the first bucket is the basic unit of brain injury would be the concussion, which we've talked about. The one issue with concussions is that, and Brooke mentioned this when she was talking to those kids in Oklahoma, is they don't admit it when they've experienced the injury. So the studies will show that 53% of high school football players will hide their symptoms. So again, who has a concussion? We don't know. Because it's not like they broke their leg and you see the bone sticking through the skin or something like that. It's a very invisible type of injury. And the issue with the kids not admitting that they have injuries is that then they're playing with undiagnosed concussions and they open themselves up to this follow-on injuries. And some of the research that I've seen has pointed out that 39% of the catastrophic brain injuries are the result of second impacts. But as we heard earlier, it's probably way underestimated. I think it's probably a significantly higher percentage of the catastrophic brain injuries are happening to players that have already experienced or have not recovered from concussions or previous injuries. And then the third bucket is this, we'll have to use a new term, but it's really just degenerative brain injury that comes from repeated hits, not necessarily concussions, but repeated trauma to the head over years. And one of the interesting statistics here is that this year, kids that are playing football will experience 1.5 billion head impacts. It's a lot of head impacts. I mean, I think one of the takeaways from Dr. Faden's presentation is we shouldn't hit our heads. I don't hit my head on purpose, and yet we play these sports where hitting your head is part of the game. Just something that needs to be looked at. I know this video is not going to play because of the way the PowerPoint loaded, but I mentioned that I got introduced to this topic by working with the military on this assessment tool. The true inspiration for getting really to starting the company was when we had this idea of, hey, let's just put a sensor on the helmet so we can figure out which kids took the big hits. I just wanted to do a sanity check. It's like you start up these companies, it's a full commitment. I mean, you put everything on the line, and it's a big undertaking. So I just wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing, and I was introduced to a youth football coach, and so I just asked him if he'd meet me for a beer, and I just wanted to get his read, a sanity check on whether this was something that I wanted to get into. So I'm talking to this guy. I'm like, what do you think? I ask him, do your players tell you that they're hurt? He says, no, my players are tough. And then, well, how do you know they take the big hits? Well, I don't know. So I said, well, what do you think if we had the sensor you stick on the back of the helmet, it tells you when the kid takes a big hit? So he says, there's no effing way I'm putting the sensor on the kid's helmet. What happens if it's 3rd down and 2 yards to go and the kid's light comes on? And I'm waiting for him to laugh. But it was not a joke. He was absolutely serious. This guy's ego was so tied up in winning the game that he was going to let the kid play with potential brain injury. This guy's coaching 8-year-old tackle football. That was the point when I said, I have to start the company. I felt like a moral obligation to take that guy out of the loop in deciding which kid gets assessed for an injury. So then I really started looking at, okay, who plays football? Obviously, guys in the NFL play football, but that's a very small percentage of the players who play football. Actually, most football players are under 14 years old. They play in these Pop Warner leagues and other youth leagues, and they play under the guidance of parents who volunteer to coach. And these people, these parents that volunteer, like Coach Charles in Annapolis for the Peninsula Athletic League, great coach. He, during the day, he sells replacement windows, and he gets out there as quickly as he can to coach these kids, and he does a great job, but he doesn't have time to do things like charge batteries or take care of a new piece of equipment. He's barely able to make it out there and do what he does to coach the team. So when we were thinking about these sensors, we thought, well, how do these sensors have to work? And we developed a set of requirements for how the sensors would have to work for them to be viable. So obviously the first thing that the sensor has to do is we have to identify the players that have experienced the hits. But we have to make it super duper easy, beyond easy. And what does that mean? It means that we felt to make the sensor successful, we have to not require any kind of behavior change on the part of the players. So that's what led us to putting the sensor on the helmet. The sensor on the helmet turns out to be technically very difficult because we're not trying to measure the helmet acceleration. We're trying to measure what's happening at the center of gravity of the head. But the helmet's a very convenient place to put it, and it lets the player play without any change in behavior. The other thing is we didn't want anyone to have to turn this thing on or turn it off, because we know people forget to turn it on, or they'll turn it off on purpose, because we are getting an understanding. These kids want to play. They don't want to be taken out of the game. That's why they That's why they lie about not having symptoms. And I know from that guy that I had beer with that the coaches, they will turn the sensor off if they have the opportunity to. So you design it so you can't turn it off. But also, you have to charge the battery. So that's impossible. We had to make it so it would be really easy to put on the helmets. So we thought we'd just peel it and stick it on the back of the helmet if we can make that work. And we wanted it to be really simple. Maintain the sociology of injury management that's happening right now in youth sports, where you have basically shared responsibility with the other kids and the parents and the officials. Everyone's responsible. If they see a kid who falls down on the field or is bleeding, everyone sees it and they make a comment about it. So that led us to, even though as a technologist you'd be really tempted to throw a lot of technology at this, we really wanted to keep it simple, keep the alert simple, no remote monitoring of the output, because there is no one in youth sports that's currently a centralized safety monitor. So if you try to centralize the communication of an alert, in youth sports, you're providing a centralized piece of information to a person that doesn't exist. It's got to be something that is spread out in this shared responsibility. So this was a set of requirements. It was actually quite difficult because the other part of this is that it had to be affordable. How do you make all this stuff work and keep it affordable? But what we ended up with is a sensor which, with the goal of protecting the athletes from brain injury, we're working to identify which players need to be assessed. Again, not a diagnostic product. And we're trying to monitor the head impacts over time. The sensor that, actually this is a picture of the sensor we're introducing this year, we also decided that one way of trying to keep it really simple was make it an annual subscription instead of them buying the sensor. Because one of the things we saw in a number of these presentations is that we still don't know a lot about brain injury, about the physics of brain injury, about what's happening, the recovery periods, but we're learning so much more these days. A lot of the studies that have been cited this morning are things that are going on right now. So there's a lot of learning going on. So having a product which has an annual subscription allows us to continually improve the product and not be locked down to a particular solution for a number of years. So we keep it an annual subscription. It also, the sensor just attaches to the back of the helmet. The battery, for practical purposes, lasts forever because of that subscription model. We designed the system so that the battery will last a year, goes to sleep when it's not being used, it wakes itself up, so the battery lasts the whole year, and then you get a new one the next year, so you never have to worry about the battery. And like I mentioned, it turns active when it detects motion, counts the number of hits at the subconcussive level, as well as turning on alert to the hardest of hits. The markets that we're initially focused on are these contact sports of football, hockey, and lacrosse. There are about 7.1 million participants, mostly the younger kids participating in those sports. We're quickly moving into these other areas, and Brooke talked about a number of these other sports where people wear helmets, but also the unhelmeted activities like soccer and girls lacrosse and field hockey. So I think there are about 50 million participants. Now, there are 66 million cyclists in the United States, but I really only think a fraction of those are probably really targets for technology like this because still, unfortunately, a lot won't wear a helmet or a headband or anything. So I think practically speaking, the market size for this kind of technology is about 50 million participants in the United States. We've been working on this, as I mentioned, for the past 3 years. Our current product is the first product with this next generation of triaxial MEMS accelerometers. There's a lot of technical words, but we're really at the convergence of a revolution in the understanding of brain injury and in the availability of technologies which allow for the measurement of acceleration. Really just 2 years ago, a commercial product with this type of technology would have been impossible. So, and a lot of this is actually driven by the iPhone and Nintendo, the Wii controller, which uses this has taken very expensive, complicated technology and got it to a consumer product price points. We've developed a number of patents around this issue. To develop the technology, what we've done is we've used, basically from the automobile industry, these crash test dummies, and placed sensors in the center of gravity of these crash test dummies, and then worked on developing sensor technology which attaches to the back of the helmet and try to get them to somehow match what we're seeing at the back of the helmet to what's happening at the center of the gravity of the head. in this entire process, one of the things that we've been looking to do during the whole thing is to make things really easy. So I really love this quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "Any fool can make things more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction." And I think that's really what our goal is with Brain Century, is to try to make this very complicated technology very simple. And one of the things that's very complicated about the technology is this measuring the helmet acceleration and trying to figure out what's happening at the center of gravity of the head. So just to illustrate what we're talking about, if you were to take a measurement of what's happening to the helmet and to what's happening at the center of gravity of the head during an impact, you would see that the acceleration of the helmet is very large relative to the acceleration of the center of gravity of the head, about 10 times more acceleration of the helmet. And you can see that the length of that curve there on the helmet is very short. It's a very short acceleration at the helmet and a relatively long acceleration at the center of gravity of the head. So we spent the past 2.5, 3 years trying to work on, can we get something measuring the helmet acceleration but approximating the head CG? And that's what we've accomplished with the algorithms that we have with our sensor. This is an actual output. The green tracing is the helmet acceleration, and the red line is the actual output from our sensor, and the blue line is the output from measured directly at the center of gravity of the head. So we're statistically very close to that measurement. The other thing that we realized is that helmets don't work consistently from different directions of impact. So we had to develop a map of how helmets work based on whether it hits from the front or the side, and apply a corrective algorithm to that as well. Our first feasibility model for our sensor was in 2011. And one of the tricks, I think, to developing technology like this is to be willing to eat your young, to be willing to build something, and these prototypes all become like children, and it's like you want them to succeed, but you have to be willing to let them go. And we've gone through now 5 different iterations of our sensor over the past few years, testing the acceptance, the adhesives, whether we're going to interrupt the flow of the game. In the spring of 2013, we got involved with the Arena Football League, and this was a preseason game that this picture's from in 2013. And then in the fall, in August of 2013, we finally launched our first commercial product, which is now the official sensor for the Arena Football League, as well as this is a photograph from the state of Maryland football all-star high school game, where they're using our sensor. And this fall, we're introducing our hit counter, which we hope will do for brains what the pitch counting is done for kids' elbows in baseball. So currently the adoption for our technology, the Brain Century sensor is now the official sensor for arena football. That's the first professional sport to adopt any kind of technology like this for managing concussions. We're the official sensor for the Maryland High School All-Star football game. A lot of the top collegiate programs are doing testing with our sensors. LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Arizona start using our sensor technology. A number of large youth football programs are starting to adopt the technology. Later this year, an OEM helmet manufacturers for both football and lacrosse will start integrating our technology into their helmets, and we'll probably have about 25,000 of these sensors in the market by the end of this year. There's my email, and thank you very much.